Tonight, we'll hear the story of a young woman called Pandora, who is given a remarkable box as a gift. One day the box is opened, which leads to Pandora being taken on a journey full of wonder and delight. I'm your narrator, John Kavanagh, and this is Pandora's Box by Gillian Rogerson. Many years ago, in Greece, the gods who lived on top of Mount Olympus gave a special box to a woman called Pandora as a wedding gift. They told her to take good care of it. Pandora thanked the gods and placed the box in a prominent position so that all guests to her home could see it. One day, when a visitor was admiring the item, he asked Pandora what she kept inside the box. Pandora replied she didn't keep anything in it, and in fact had never even opened it. When the guest left her home, Pandora returned to the box and gave it a studious look and wondered why she'd never thought to open it. She slowly reached out towards the box and rested her hand lightly on the lid. A soft, fluttering noise came from within it. Concerned there was something trapped inside, Pandora swiftly took the lid off the box and placed it at the side of the container. A beautiful butterfly with wings the colour of an indigo twilight sky flew from the bottom of the box and rested on the rim. It gently flapped its wings back and forth, sending out a relaxing scent that Pandora couldn't quite identify, but it lifted her spirits, and she instantly knew it was going to be a wonderful day. Before she could wonder how long the butterfly had been inside the box, and if it was okay, the butterfly became airborne and fluttered towards the open window. It landed on the sill and looked back at Pandora, as though asking her to follow it. Then the butterfly flew out of the window. Leaving the lid where it was, Pandora picked up the box and went after the butterfly, using the door rather than the window. The butterfly dipped and bobbed through the air as it flew through the city. It was early afternoon, and the stalls which lined the streets were doing a brisk trade. Hand-woven blankets in an assortment of bright colours lay on tables like resting rainbows. Tunics made from the finest silks hung gracefully on wooden holders, and rays from the sun highlighted the threads of silver and gold which ran through the garments. Clay-fired pots in shades of ochre and orange nestled in neat rows next to each other. A medley of voices filled the air, neighbours talking to each other, stall-holders proclaiming their wares, good-humoured haggling between customers and vendors. But it was the sound of children playing which Pandora noticed the most. Their laughter was light and carefree, and softly melodic, like wind chimes moving in the breeze. It brought a smile to Pandora's face, and she stopped for a moment to watch the children at play. The indigo butterfly rested on the top of a marble statue and watched them too. Young children sat beneath stall tables that were owned by their parents. They played games with their clay dolls and animals, and were delightfully lost in their imaginary worlds. Every so often, they would talk to their toys and let out gurgles of giggles. Older children played games in the cobbled streets. Groups of boys and girls chased after a ball as it rolled along the cobbles and into an alleyway. Another group of children played with wooden yo-yos. The painted circles ran smoothly up and down the strings. A game of hopscotch was in full swing, with lots of joyful cheering coming from children on all sides. The images brought back wonderful memories of Pandora's own childhood, causing a feeling of joy to settle in her heart. Out of nowhere, a butterfly with wings as yellow as a freshly opened buttercup flew towards Pandora and into the open box. It rested on the bottom of it, closed its wings, and was still. Pandora wondered if it had gone to sleep in there. She didn't wish to disturb it and decided to let it rest there. Pandora noticed the indigo butterfly had left the statue and was flying away along the street once more. She followed it again. They passed through an open courtyard where a man wearing a laurel of gold-coloured leaves upon his head was playing a lute. The music was so uplifting that Pandora couldn't help but turn her steps into a joyful skip as she went by him. The butterfly headed towards a small, whitewashed house outside the courtyard, where an elderly man was sitting at a loom. Pandora caught up with the butterfly and watched the man at work. The shuttle in his hand smoothly travelled back and forth across the loom. Its rhythm was soothing, which made Pandora think he was making music rather than cloth. The man noticed her and with a friendly smile invited her closer. The indigo butterfly took up a resting position on the roof of the house. Pandora looked in admiration at the blanket the man was making. She told him it was beautiful and asked how long he'd been a weaver. Without pausing in his endeavours, he said he'd been a weaver ever since he'd been big enough to reach the loom. He could have retired from his work years ago, but it didn't feel at all like work to him. It was an activity that filled him with contentment and peace. He loved sitting outside his cozy home and watching the world go by as he worked his loom. He asked Pandora to listen to the sounds around them, not just the loom, but other noises too. Pandora lifted her head and heard the sweet songs of birds coming from the trees further along the road, the gentle bubbling of a waterfall in the courtyard, cheerful singing coming from a neighbour's house, and the distant sound of children still at play in the town. She smiled at the weaver. He returned her smile with a look of understanding, as if he knew she was hearing the same heart-warming sounds as he was. A warm feeling of peacefulness settled on Pandora. Out of nowhere, a butterfly with wings as blue as the Aegean Sea fluttered towards Pandora and went inside the box. It settled next to the yellow butterfly and became just as still as it. The indigo butterfly took to the skies again and flew away. Pandora thanked the man for his time and continued on her journey, carefully holding the box so as not to disturb the resting butterflies inside. The next house they came to was occupied by a young mother and her family. The mother was sitting in the front garden with a baby on her lap and 3 children at her feet. The children had paintbrushes in their hands and were absorbed in a task. The indigo butterfly rested on the branch of a willow tree at the side of the house. Curiosity drove Pandora closer to the family, and she politely asked the woman what the children were doing. The woman gently transferred the sleeping infant to her shoulder and told Pandora the children were painting their blessings onto pebbles. It was something her mother had taught her to do, and something she'd passed on to her children. Seeing the bewildered look on Pandora's face, the woman explained that the children collected pebbles from the surrounding fields once a week, and they would paint an image of something they were thankful for. As though knowing they were the subject of Pandora and their mother's conversation, the children held their pebbles up and told Pandora what they'd painted. The smallest child had drawn a bunch of grapes. She told Pandora she loved grapes and could eat them every day. She wished her bed was an enormous grape so that she could eat it as soon as she woke up. She put her hand over her mouth and started to giggle at the thought of a grape being as big as a bed. Her laugh was infectious and made Pandora laugh too. The other children had painted pictures of their mother and the new baby. The mother asked the children to take Pandora to the back of the house and show her where the painted pebbles were kept. Pandora followed the children around the side of the house and into the back garden. She came to a stop when she saw row upon row of painted pebbles that filled the garden. Each stone depicted an image of something the family were thankful for. In silence, Pandora thought about her life and all the wonderful things she had, the people she knew, and the days which had been full of laughter. She had a lot to appreciate in her life. As soon as one memory came to her, another soon followed. Perhaps she could fill a garden with pebbles too. Out of nowhere, a butterfly with wings as green as a precious emerald fluttered towards Pandora and into the box. It settled next to the other two resting butterflies. She showed the box to the children. Their eyes widened in wonder. She told them where the butterflies had come from. The indigo butterfly was on the move again. Pandora thanked the family and went on her way. Pandora and the indigo butterfly passed through a small village next, which was surrounded by groves of olive trees. Pandora knew it was harvest time for the olives and wasn't surprised to see a family from one of the houses heading into the field behind them, carrying olive nets that would be used to collect the falling fruit. What she didn't expect was to see all the neighbours from the other houses coming out too, all of them laden with nets and sticks which had been fashioned to gently dislodge the ripened olives. The indigo butterfly rested on a low wall near the houses. Pandora sat on the wall too and watched the harvesting scene unfolding in front of her. First came the laying of the nets. The large blankets were positioned around the trees as tenderly as a parent tucking a child into bed at night. Once every part of the ground had been covered in nets, it was time to persuade the olives to become free from their branches. Several methods were used, including tapping the fruit gently with a stick or giving the tree a shake. Some people climbed up ladders and reached out to set the olives free. There was a lot of laughter and calls of congratulations as olives began to tumble from the trees like rain. Pandora became caught up in the festivity of the activity and felt the need to help. She carefully placed the box of resting butterflies behind the wall and then walked towards the olive trees. She offered her services to the woman who owned the trees, but added an apologetic smile and advised she'd never harvested olives before and wasn't sure how good she would be. The kindly-faced woman took Pandora under her wing and handed her a long stick. She led Pandora over to a smaller tree that had branches laden with ripe fruit. With some help from her new friend. It didn't take Pandora long to get into the swing of tapping the branches in the right place and with the right amount of gentle pressure. The fruit began to fall onto the soft nets below. A round of applause went up from around Pandora, from the neighbours who'd been watching her progress. It brought a warmth into her heart. Once all the olives were on the ground, the nets were gathered up in such a manner as to keep every last olive inside them. Time flew by, and before Pandora knew it, the sky was beginning to darken. She noticed the indigo butterfly on a branch close by and wondered how long it had been there. The butterfly rose from the branch and flew towards the wall where Pandora had placed the box a while ago. Not wanting to disturb the chatting neighbours, Pandora quietly left the field and walked back to the wall. She picked up the box and looked inside. The butterflies were still there. Pandora looked back at the fields behind the houses and smiled to herself. How kind the neighbours were to each other, and how kind they were to welcome her into their lives too, albeit for a short time. Out of nowhere, a butterfly with wings as silver as twinkling stars flew towards the box and went inside. It rested with the others. Pandora was too preoccupied with the butterflies to notice her friend of earlier approaching until the woman lightly tapped her on the shoulder. The woman asked Pandora to return to the field and join in with the harvest celebrations. A large meal had been prepared, which everyone had contributed to, and she would love Pandora to join them. And when the celebrations ended, they would arrange a horse and carriage to take her home. Pandora was touched by her kindness and, with thanks, happily accepted her invite. But, Pandora said, she didn't have anything to contribute to the meal and wondered if there was anything else she could give. Perhaps she could help tidy up, or maybe play an instrument as background music. The woman looked towards the open box and said Pandora could tell everyone why she was carrying a box with such beautiful butterflies inside, and said she was certain Pandora had a story to tell about them. After the festivities, everyone gathered around Pandora to listen to her story. As Pandora took a seat in front of the villagers, the indigo butterfly flew towards her and alighted on her shoulder. Pandora smiled at it. Then she began her tale. She explained how the gods had given her the box as a wedding present, and how she'd never opened it until today. As soon as she said the last word, the butterflies rose from inside the box and alighted on the edge of it. They slowly opened and closed their wings, which caused soft murmurs of delight to ripple through everyone who saw them. Pandora spoke about the children playing in the streets and how they had found joy in everything they did. Some people nodded as they recalled their days as children and the fun they'd had too. She pointed to the butterfly with wings the colour of a freshly opened buttercup and said it had appeared out of nowhere and flown into the box. She explained about the weaver and the feeling of peace and serenity which filled his life. She nodded towards the butterfly, which had wings as blue as the Aegean Sea, and said it too had appeared out of nowhere. Pandora gestured towards the butterfly with wings as green as a precious emerald, and relayed the tale of the painted pebbles. She smiled as she described the garden, which contained row upon row of pictures captured on pebbles. It prompted many people to say it was a wonderful idea, and they would start creating their own painted pebbles the next day. The last butterfly to receive attention was the one that had wings as silver as sparkling stars. Pandora said it had flown towards her when she was thinking about how kind everyone here had been to each other and to her. A hushed silence fell as people looked around at their neighbours and friends. Warm smiles were shared between them. The woman who had invited Pandora to the celebrations, said it was a way of life for them to help each other, and something they had always done. Her neighbors nodded in agreement. One by one, they began to talk about how neighbors had helped each other over the years. Age-old, cherished recipes had been shared throughout the village. New mothers had received welcome help upon the arrival of a new baby. Carriage rides were always available to those who needed it. Flowers left over after weddings had been distributed throughout the village, and whenever a person needed to talk to someone, there was always a listening ear nearby. A soft smile came to Pandora's face as she listened to the many acts of kindness, the love these people had for each other was heartwarming. Out of nowhere, a cloud of red butterflies flitted through the darkening sky. They rested on the olive trees. Pandora saw them first and pointed to them. Everyone turned around. There was an audible gasp of delight as they looked upon the trees covered in beautiful butterflies. One of the red butterflies flew towards Pandora and into the open box, where it settled down to rest, as if they'd been waiting for their red companion. The other butterflies returned to their previous positions inside the box too. The indigo butterfly left Pandora's shoulder and flew into the container and settled next to the others. Pandora knew it was time to go home. She was given a lift back to her house in a carriage. When she returned home, she placed the box on the sill of her open window. She didn't put the lid back on. News soon spread about Pandora and her box of butterflies. Many people asked her to tell them how they came to be there. Pandora told them her tale. And as she talked, the butterflies would line up on the top of the box, waiting for Pandora to point to them. The yellow butterfly for joy, blue for peace, green for appreciation, silver for kindness, red for love. And the indigo butterfly was for hope. And when you had hope in your heart, you had everything.